So I want to tell you a little bit about the study that we do. We've done this every year for at least the last 7 years that I'm aware of. And pretty much what we like to do is use this to inform us for the different sorts of products that my team who does commercial media offerings to you, to make sure we've got a nice sort of product line. We know it's not just about print and banners, it's about having that engaging, important sort of content. So this study is done by segment and specialty. We've got a number of different specialties. We also have it carved up by years in practice. So I'm going to show you this sort of general overview of the overall summary, but if there's anything that interests you, please feel free to reach out to me, because we can show this to you carved up in dozens of different ways. So today we'll talk about why content. What's important about that? We'll talk about some of the HCP preferences and the types of content, some of the challenges that they have with content, and then how we can build an engaging experience. And I'll show you an example of something we've been toying around with for a couple of years that I think may be of interest. And then we'll conclude pretty much with a summary and different sources of content that you should really be considering. So before I move on further, by a show of hands, who here believes that content is king? And I can't see any hands, so. Okay, a good many of you. Who believes data is king? I'm surprised there are not quite as many. Okay, that's interesting. All right, so I'm here to say I think that they are both king. What we have to understand is that marketers sort of live in that data world. Doctors live in that content world. They're looking for the data, but not the same sort of data that you're using to inform the journey, right? You want to make sure that they're following a certain path down. They want to make sure they're getting the most important information that they need for their practice. So content, we feel it has the ability to change practice behavior that will affect patient outcomes. Wolters Kluwer as a whole has always believed that. We are a company that doesn't just produce content. We have solutions for clinicians at the bedside. I'll finish with a slide that may surprise you, all the different areas that we're involved in, but our company has been around more than 200 years, and we produce journals on behalf of many societies, and we've got other decision-making tools to help doctors and nurses, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, as they practice with their patients. So why is content marketing important? Well, a lot of reasons, and it's about that journey. So you want to be able to create awareness. You need them to learn about your brands, your products, your launches. You might need it to, capture market share, defend market share. There's a lot of different reasons why you're taking them down that path. You might do it for education, consideration. You want them to understand the products. You want them to understand the therapies. You want them to understand everything about it to help them help their patients. And then you also need to use it maybe to influence and help them take an action. And that action can be, a decision to utilize the product or to redirect them somewhere else. You can get them to engage. When you use content, you can do all these sort of things, and it's definitely, a useful tool. It's important to them. So let me ask you this. Who here is from agencies? Okay, quite a few of you, all right. And who here would be from like pharma device and other industry? Okay, not quite so many of you. That's okay. It's important that I'm trying to address all of this because, pharma wants their agencies to utilize the best possible way to get their information and messaging out there. So I'm going to ease you into some of the study and the graphs and charts that you will see shortly. 51% of healthcare providers expect to see advertisements in the resources that they're using. So two of the more interesting comments that I found from the study were, one was sort of logical and the other is just kind of insightful. It's a means to help pay and reduce the cost of access to the content. And the other was a necessary evil. What's anybody think about that? Have you heard anything like that? Anybody? Sorry, can't see anything now. All right, let's get into it a little bit further. So we asked a question about industry messages in professional resources and what they mean to a healthcare provider. Again, some very interesting comments here. A necessary annoyance, occasionally a source of interest, especially about a new product. It's a revenue stream to offset the costs. Well, that's again along the logical line. But some actually appreciate it. They like transparency though, that's very important. But there's that ulterior motive that everybody sort of has in the back of their mind. You just want to sell me a product. Important. It's important that you don't have that ulterior motive or agenda. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we will make sure that we can do something like that. So general impressions of industry-sponsored messages, it's very positive. Honestly, more than, almost 50% feel that there's some value in a topic that is being covered with the content marketing that's being offered. It's a good way to learn about different products. It's important, again, we come back to that cost, to keep the cost of resources down. Some feel they're intrusive, and some feel they're not useful at all. So we need to make sure that we're trying to not be intrusive and use some of the facts and data that we'll talk about in a little bit here. So with sponsored content, these were some very interesting bits of information. If you're putting your message out with a medical nursing society or a member site, the blue line is they visit the sponsor's website, the percentage of people that are actually going to that website, and then their next actions, contact the company rep or recommend products to others, or they file, print, or save that for future reference. I think all of those are very positive. We also see that online medical journal sites are still a primary source for it. And then we have some other medical information websites, I didn't want to name any names, but sort of they go down the line there. But I think the alignment with a brand, with a trusted halo, like a society, or like a company that's producing products that they work with, is very important. So how do healthcare providers stay up to date? Continuing education activities ranked #1 overwhelmingly. And I told you we sliced and diced some of this data a little bit more, and one of the ways that we looked at it certainly was by their years of experience. And what we found that it was #1 among the more experienced doctors, which kind of makes sense because they need to keep up their accreditations. Your less experienced doctors are fresh out of school and they're sort of out there and they're not as interested in going to conferences and things like that. Discussions with colleagues and mentors, very, very important. So, as we're looking at the types of tactics that we're using in our messaging, KOLs are very important. Any sort of discussions, conferences, coming to an event, an industry event is helpful for them because they can talk to their colleagues. And then of course we see the journals again, the online and print. Among the newer doctors, the online obviously, and I will just say overwhelmingly as a trend, they were pretty much born digital, so that is going to be their go-to. the online. Although we have seen some trends in some of the specialties where they prefer print, which was a little eye-opening, I think, for all of us. And again, in print, mostly experienced doctors really go to that print. Conferences and symposia, high among the experienced doctors. I think this is really a good way, again, that they're getting out with their colleagues so that they can, share some of those experiences. I think we'll see that change, obviously, as our demographics change. And then we start to go down some of the lists there. So news perspectives and commentary, any of the free ones, we see that's down to about 40% utilizing it to stay up to date. Videos, including webinars, again, we're slightly dropping a little bit more. Email and e-newsletters, again, down. Digital course resources, which kind of surprised me a little bit because I was thinking continuing education, that should be up there, but for some reason the digital courses, not so much, which leads me to believe that in-person sort of continuing education environment is working a little bit better. Obviously, textbooks, reference materials, and books. Society websites, I thought would be much higher. When we look at Kantar studies, for example, we see a lot of the society websites are really ranked high up there. But again, as I mentioned, this is sort of a summary of a lot of different specialties. Podcasts, social media, all much further down on the list of content types that healthcare providers are using to keep up to date. So let's talk about the most influential content shaping treatment options and patient outcomes. Peer-reviewed content. Someone earlier over in here in this section had asked about AI and what's industry doing to sort of keep their tabs on it. As an academic publisher, I can tell you it's something that's top of mind right now. And I can also tell you that I've heard from some of our partners that we work with for media sales have said, oh, we don't need content, we're using AI. And I just sit there and go, what? You are kidding me, right? It's dangerous. I'm here to tell you, don't do it. I mean, peer review is going to be, no matter what, no matter how you slice it, it's got to be peer reviewed. I can see AI possibly helping, coming up with a summary, and then you've got several peer reviewers that are going through it. But it's, at the moment, there's just no way that is ever going to cut it. I can tell you anecdotally, we've had some some editors have had some authors come and try and submit an article. Oh, it was written by AI. No, that's not acceptable in any sort of peer-reviewed, respected journal. So, I would take that with caution. As we look at the demographic there too, we see peer-reviewed content is high among experienced doctors, But then we're going to talk about a few of the challenges that they face with that as well. Continuing education content, again, always high on the list. Clinical reviews. And why do you think a clinical review might be popular and high? Well, it's sort of condensed information. Then we look at case studies, which are popular among newer doctors, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. You're newer in your practice, you want to learn a little bit more about things. So that's, I think, sort of insightful and can help in driving the sorts of content that you're putting out there. Original research articles are still fairly high up there. Down lower in the list in the 25%, clinical opinions, not so much. Cited content, again, under 20%. Free clinical summaries, which kind of surprised me a little bit. I don't know if it's because a website is free and it's just not seen as credible. That's my guess, but we haven't delved into that. And then free content in general is down there. Industry-produced content is definitely down there, I'm sorry. And then news perspectives and comments. Not utilized and not influential in shaping patient outcomes. So I don't think any of those are a surprise to anybody. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Any surprises for you? Yes. I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
So, just a question about the sort of source of the data. Is this derived influence or stated influence?
When you say derived or stated?
So, oftentimes people say, oh yeah, the online ads I see don't impact me at all. But they do. We know that, just as an example, or the commercials you see on TV or the billboards you see, people don't often state what is influential to them versus derived what's influential.
Well, I will say in the survey itself, we give them a list that they can choose from. So I guess you could say that's sort of derived. There are probably open blanks on that. I'd have to take a look to see where exactly anything else might fall in there. We typically have an open-ended option there. So we talked a little bit about the challenges. Obviously, peer-reviewed journal content is really thick. I don't know if any of you have tried to read it. They're usually 15 to 25 pages. They're really hard. As an academic publisher, we try and encourage our editors to do things to make it easier for folks. So one of the very important projects that we're trying to get into play is plain language summaries. So these are very important in helping not just the healthcare providers, but when patients happen across information when they're doing searches on the internet. Most doctors don't have enough time to read everything that they want. So how do we put it in a format that's going to make sense and make it easier for them to digest those bite-sized pieces? Well, smaller bits of those summaries, the text-based, video, podcasts, and using infographics. Infographics are getting, more popular, and there's a lot of companies out there that are now doing sort of these infographics that are 3D. You touch a button and it explodes different things. So they do help often with the mechanism of action and explaining some very, very difficult to understand concepts. Again, articles too long, the main points aren't there to understand. Relevant articles are difficult to find. Unless you are you're part of an institution and you have a librarian that's doing your searches for you, it's hard for a doctor who's trying to get some information very quickly. Or they simply don't have access to the sorts of journals that they need. And then they wonder if the content itself is credible. So there's a lot of challenges that the doctors face. And to me, what that says is maybe, as a publisher, there are things that we can be doing to help them, but also as marketers, there's a lot of things that we can be doing to make sure that the content marketing we're utilizing makes sense. So the credibility of resources. On the left side is a pie chart. We mentioned peer-reviewed online medical journals. I mean, that's definitely, the widest source of credible. We see specialty medical websites, about 20%, and I can't read this other one. General medical websites, 16.7, and physician social networks, much lower. So each of these has their own special purpose in a healthcare provider's life, and that's sort of, I like to look at that as that's the amount of time that they're sort of spending in these places based on the sort of content that they're looking for. We have the right side chart there. You've got the difference between sort of your commentary based and then your scholarly based. So your scholarly, think about your medical journals that are all peer-reviewed versus some of the maybe general medical websites that might have lots of information out there. And there's no shortage of information out there. So it's difficult for a doctor to find the kind of information that they need and make sure that it's something that they believe that they can trust. So, what can we do? How can we add some credibility to the advertisements and things that we're doing? We hear this a lot, having research to support it. So, in any of your advertising or in any of your promotion or your content, have something to substantiate why it's important and why it is credible. Having clinical data. Many of the pharmaceutical companies publish lots and lots of clinical trials in our journal. Use that as a reference. That's your friend. It's important. Industry-sponsored messages next to a relevant article. I know that's a tough one because there's often a lot of editors that absolutely will not allow anything like that. Typically in your scholarly journals, you've got your front and back spaces, and you might have a well in the middle if you're lucky. What some of the more novel ones have done is they've separated their table of contents so that you could put ads between them, and then maybe try and space that ad near the page where it's talking about a particular article. I suspect that may go away eventually, because I've noticed that on many scholarly journal websites you now can have advertisements on journal pages. I will tell you one interesting thing that we sort of learned the hard way is everybody knows what an interstitial ad is? Okay, so Google apparently started dinging publishers if your interstitial ad appeared on an article page because their bots couldn't crawl you. And you began to lose ranking with that. So you will probably see less of those. They can be on a page where there isn't an article content, but they can't be buried on a page where there is an actual article. So that is something that was very interesting that we learned in the last few months. Let's see, graphs and charts. That helps people. It helps them digest that information in a fairly quick manner. Links to things within your marketing is also very, very helpful. We know that they like visually appealing things, not tons of content-heavy sort of messaging. And the type of message showing up in the tactic that you're using, make sure it makes sense. I think some other things on there, print-based resources. We all know print is sort of going away, but we also have heard here this week that healthcare providers still like print, and I've heard that mentioned by several people. So the content types supporting your objectives. There's so many different sorts of tactics that you can use for awareness, education, and influence as you drag people through a journey. Utilize some of these, and don't just use one or two. Use them in one place, because that is actually what's going to help drive people and engage them. We know that having the right content in the right place at the right time is key. If you have the opportunity to put a lot of different sorts of content together, why wouldn't you? If somebody lands there, whether you've got a target list that you're driving, or if you're just looking to create awareness within a particular specialty with oncologists or something, utilize what you can there. So here's a little bit of an example that I kind of wanted to walk you through. Everybody's heard of resource centers, and they've had a life of their own. They've come and gone a lot of different ways. But what we're finding is that just plain old, content-heavy knowledge centers just aren't the way to go. Doctors like them. They love curated content because they can zone into something very quickly and find out a lot of different things that they didn't know. A lot of these knowledge hubs that we've built, we find that doctors are bookmarking them. We find that if we're updating them often, and we have the drivers to these, people are very engaged with them. And we're trying to find different sources to make sure that we can keep that engagement level high. One of the things that's been difficult at times is trying to build these so that you're bringing in enough different data sources. You know, something that's not specific to a particular society or a journal, that's been a challenge, but we're working through that. And this, I couldn't link out to a site, so if you would love to see a demo of this live and in person, please reach out. We've got some live demos that we can show you. But basically, this is the knowledge center that we've developed. It's got information from a number of different areas. This one in particular is for our ASCO products. You know, we've had videos on it. We pulled information from their daily news. We have some video abstracts. We also have additional articles there, and believe it or not, we're allowed to link out to non-ASCO publications, which was a very big change from what we had experienced in the past. And again, some more diversity in the page there, and that's pretty much the end of it. So, you know, in summarizing all of this, we know that we should be leveraging sources that have some sort of educational value, very important. We need to make sure that the content you're using, peer-reviewed, credible, very, very, very important. We know that sponsorship triggers an action to go visit a sponsor site. We've seen that. And healthcare providers need to understand your value. You know, you don't just kind of want to talk at them. You want to tell them why it's important. You know, make them want that content or product that you have. Teach them about what you've got to offer. And then make sure we're utilizing studies and your clinical trial data. All of that stuff is going to be important. And then the trusted content is what matters most. And here's my little sales pitch for Wolters Kluwer. You know, many of you may know us from different ways. If you're an agency, you know you've done advertising with us, whether it's traditional or special project. If you're pharma, you've probably, you know, got a subscription to Ovid, which gives your researchers access to everything, and you publish in the journals, your clinical trials. But what's important to remember is that we've got a number of different products. The publishing arm is really the smaller part of it, and what my commercial team does is much smaller than Wolters Kluwer in total. Some of the names that you might recognize, they're up to date. I mean, Kantar, up to date is #1. Can you advertise there? No, you never will, but I will tell you I'm talking to Dr. Bonus this afternoon to see how we might leverage more of his content. So that's sort of a good thing. Ovid is the institutional arm where you get access to 1 million things. We gain insights from the research that's done on that site. So we can help provide data that, you know, if you want to see what people are researching, we have that sort of insight. All of these products, they're their own little world, and there's a lot of data behind all of them. And that is another thing that we are trying to do, as my group is trying to do, is pull these bits of data together. You know, utilize the AI to try and build some of the stories. And I invite all of you, if you've got any ideas or if there's something you want to know, please feel free to reach out. Can I answer any questions? I got 1 minute and 15 seconds. No? Thank you.